Uber, one of the world's most highly valued private companies, is an embodiment of lawsuits, public backlash, shady deals, illegality, and just about anything that keeps it in business. With a presence in over 10,000 cities globally, this household name is a thorn in the flesh of regulatory agencies, passengers, and its employees. There's hardly a beginning or an end to the Uber story, but we'll start somewhere. Uber began in Paris in 2008 when Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp attended an annual tech event. The program gathered several tech enthusiasts to debate the future. Both men had just sold their startups the previous year for a huge sum and were scouting for another idea worth investing. Travis sold Red Swoosh for $19 million, while Garrett sold StumbleUpon to eBay for $75 million. On a winter night after the conference, both men stood outside waiting for a cab, but it wasn't forthcoming. Frustrated, Garrett asked his friend, "What if you could request a ride from your phone?" Both entrepreneurs did not give much thought to the question because they wanted to get home by any means. When they returned to San Francisco, Garrett began pondering the idea. It was then that he bought and registered the domain name ubercab.com. In 2009, Garrett was still the CEO of StumbleUpon, but was working on the Uber idea on the side. By the summer of that year, he convinced Travis to join him in the incubating process of this new company. They hastened their strategies, and by 2010, they tested the idea in New York with 3 cars. In May 2010, the company officially launched in San Francisco. It appointed Ryan Graves as its CEO earlier that year, but Travis took over in December. Uber rose to the limelight in the blink of an eye. The company realized that the world waited for this innovation all their lives because the ease it provided in the transportation sector was second to none. Passengers could order a ride at the tap of a button, and the cost was automatically charged to the card linked to the account. The San Francisco-based startup grew faster than it imagined, and in 2 years it launched in Paris. Of course, Paris was the motivation behind this company. Funding was not a problem for Uber since it had great prospects. By 2011, the company announced that it had raised $37 million in funding from Goldman Sachs, Menlo Ventures, and Jeff Bezos. The next year, the company expanded its service by launching UberX, a less expensive hybrid car offering an alternative to the black car service in the status quo. Everything seemed promising on the outside. Fame, profit, convenience, public support, everything. Uber may not have prepared for the dynamics it would later encounter in the market. But as time passed, it found cunning ways to get out of it. What if I told you that Uber operates illegally in many cities? How then does it go unpunished in those locations? Regular taxi companies have licensed and registered drivers on the roads. Whenever regulators slammed Uber with questions about its taxi operations, the company claimed it was a communication platform and not a taxi service. As a result, they vehemently ignored regulators and operated on their terms, where they operated with taxi companies accusing them of sabotaging their business. Of course, that was the only way the company could infiltrate famous cities and rake in as much profit as possible. Uber's biggest advantage over most taxi companies is that it uses ordinary vehicles with no formalities or licenses. Uber and its drivers avoided commercial registration, special licenses, vehicle inspections, background checks, and other expenses other taxi companies incurred. As a result, the company saved millions of dollars. Through this, they offered lower prices to customers, luring them into using the service. The traditional taxis could not offer as many discounts because they needed to pay taxes and other fees associated with running a business. Therefore, they were disadvantaged as far as Uber was in their city. Uber's most distinctive feature was defending illegality. They invested huge sums in building software that mobilized drivers and passengers to lobby regulators. They perfected this deception so well that they had people speak out for them whenever the government questioned their operations. It set up a litigation team that defended its operation regardless of how tricky the situation was. Uber's lawyers were the highest enablers of the illegality. Rather than advise the companies on how to keep its operation within the ambit of the law, they concealed some shady deals from the government. Since the company was founded on key values like always be hustling, bold, and super pumped, it faced one scandal after another. It was as though they got into a new city, changed the rules, and bought public support. In every city they penetrated, they clashed with regulators and taxi operators. It didn't even matter to Uber since it always had its way around it. It would solve the issues from its profit and still have enough to expand to other areas. Have you ever wondered how the company keeps growing despite shutting operations in many cities? In September 2015, Uber was forced out of Bulgaria after a mass protest led by traditional taxi operators. They accused the company of unfair trade practices since most drivers operated without legal status. After investigations, the Supreme Court agreed with the taxi operators and banned the company from operating. However, a petition supporting Uber circulated throughout the city, with 77% of the people saying the service was reliable, safe, and affordable. 2/3 of the residents said Uber should continue its work, but under new regulations. This clearly was a case of citizens sabotaging the government's effort to sanitize the ride-hailing industry. You wouldn't blame those who signed this petition. They were indirectly incentivized to do so since the company offered the highest standard of service at the time. Uber had mastered its craft so well that it could get people to do whatever it wanted. Uber was desperate to get regulators on its side. Mark McGann, a former staff member of the company and the chief lobbyist for Europe, the Middle East and Africa, admitted that his then company ignored the laws to its advantage. Mark was employed to talk to the media, government and the people and convince them about his company's processes. He opened the citizens' eyes to a false economic opportunity he believed only Uber offered. Investigations revealed that Uber attempted to convince lawmakers to relax strict taxi laws and draft new ones to favour them. The company denies these claims, but the information out there says otherwise. The Uber files are a trover of over 124,000 records, including 1,000 files containing conversations and 83,000 emails from 2013 to 2017. These records were leaked to The Guardian and other media organisations like BBC Panorama. The document shows how an alleged $90 million a year lobbying in Europe recruited politicians to help effect changes in the continent's taxi industry. Emmanuel Macron, the then Minister for the Economy, had always been on good terms with Travis and even assured him of reforming laws in the firm's favour. The files also exposed the firm's kill switch strategy. A kill switch is used to disable or shut down a software program to prevent theft or data loss. This tactic cut access to Uber servers in at least 6 countries. The order was championed by the former CEO Travis Kalanick, who asked staff to appear confused to distract the police during a raid. This switch was first used in 2014 in France following anger from taxi services in the country. This helped them block access from the authorities trying to get access to drivers' information. The downside to this was that the company made away with lots of its shady deals. McGann said the company's mantra to its staff was, "Don't ask for permission, just launch, enlist drivers, go out, do the marketing, and quickly people will wake up and see what a great thing Uber is." There's no denying that Uber followed this mantra to the letter. It didn't matter how often people protested on the street against its operations, it was out there for the money. You can tell that the company was drunk on enthusiasm. Uber threatened to suspend its operation in Quebec if authorities did not relax the new legislation, which it deemed unfavourable. The legislation compels Uber drivers to undergo police criminal records check and 35 hours of training. Uber's general manager in Quebec, Jean-Nicolas Guillemet, said the law was the most restrictive in North America. He insisted that it would discourage many part-time drivers from operating in the area. He claimed that the company has a platform where drivers are assessed after every ride, and those with poor ratings are trained. He said that it was unfair for the government to impose training on Uber drivers. The problem with this argument is that the company always wanted to be in charge. It abhors going by the rules, thus creating a rift between them and regulators. One would have thought that Uber would be excited about the training and security check for its drivers. But no, this may slow down profit for the time these drivers are trained, or so we think. Worse still, a thorough security check on these drivers may reveal heartbreaking statistics. Uber would rather keep these details in-house and sort them out themselves. This brings us to the question of safety. How safe are Uber rides? In July 2022, about 550 women said they were subjected to various forms of violence by Uber drivers, so they sued the company. Slater Shulman filed the civil action at San Francisco County Superior Court. The firm said most women were kidnapped, falsely imprisoned, raped, harassed, stalked, or attacked by Uber drivers. Reacting to the suit, the company's spokesman said Uber handles every sexual assault report seriously. In this video, you'll decide whether or not this is true. Uber reacted to the suit, saying the women had not provided critical incident details to identify a connection to the Uber platform. In other words, it was exonerating the drivers without investigating their allegations. Several women narrated how they narrowly escaped death after an experience with an abusive Uber driver. Adam Slater, the founding partner of Slater Schulman, accused the company of prioritizing growth over its customers' safety. Uber claimed that most cases were unreported, but studies show their claims were false. According to the US Safety Report, Uber recorded 3,824 cases of sexual assault and misconduct in 2019 and 2020. This brings us back to legislation in Canada that compels Uber drivers to undergo security checks,